Sewing a woman in half, along with pulling a rabbit out of a top hat, is one of the images that inevitably comes to mind when people hear the word magician. And the question is why? Why did this particular illusion become so popular? Why did this strange idea of performing such a sadistic procedure on stage work so well? And how did sewing a woman in half become a synonym for magic in popular culture? This illusion was first performed for the general audience on the 17th of January in 1921. Today we celebrate its 100th anniversary. In this video I'm going to talk about the history of this trick, explain what does it have to do with the 19th century decadence culture, Camel cigarettes and Alfred Hitchcock, and of course reveal its real secret, the secret of how it became the most viral meme magicians have ever created.
Last week we learned how to saw a lady in a half. This week we're going to learn how to saw a lady in 3 bits and dispose of the body in... Oh!
My name is Alex Romanov, I'm a magician and an art historian. This is Art of Impossible, a channel where I talk about the history and meaning of magic as a performing art. This episode is produced in partnership with The Vanishing Inc. And now, let's begin. (1920) December, St. George's Hall, London. A group of theatre managers and producers is sitting and watching a man on stage, who announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to demonstrate a modern mystery and a scientific marvel, the inexplicable problem of solid through solid, which I shall demonstrate this evening by attempting to saw through a woman." This, as far as we know, was the first time anyone has ever said these words on stage. The magician on stage was P.T.Selbit, an inventor, a performer and a writer, and it was a trial performance of the sewing for a selected audience of show business people. Selbit had created many illusions before and would create even more after, but none of them would become as popular as the sewing. Most probably he could not even imagine that this illusion would soon become one of the most popular spectacles on both sides of the Atlantic. In the course of 1 year it was copied, changed and performed by dozens of magicians. It became a reason for scandals, lawsuits and rivalries. Selbit's name would eventually be forgotten by the general public, but the illusion would remain in popular culture forever. So who was this Selbit, the man behind this legendary idea? His real name was Percy Thomas Tibbles, and he was born in London in 1879. As a young boy, he visited shows in Egyptian Hall, the most popular magic theatre in England. It was also known as the England's Home of Mystery, and it was managed by John Neville Maskelyne, a famous magician and an influential producer. One of his associates was Charles Morrit. Morrit rented a basement in a silversmith's shop for his illusion workshop, and young Percy Tibbles happened to be employed in this shop. So obviously he was excited that he was so close to a workshop of a professional illusionist. Instead of introducing himself to Morrit, he decided to go the other way. He picked the lock of the basement when Morrit left and was able to get a closer look at magician's paraphernalia. He would sneak into the basement every night and look at how the illusions were constructed. This was for sure a very magical experience for a teenager, although very illegal. Well, many magical experiences are illegal.
I mean, it's legal, right?
Totally legal.
Okay.
Later, Percy Tibbles created his stage name Selbit by reversing his real name and dropping one letter. In 1900, when he was 21, his picture was printed on the cover of the first issue of Magic, the first British conjuring monthly magazine. Its editor, Alice Stenyon, predicted that the 21-year-old performer would have a brilliant career. And he was right. But the success did not come overnight. Selbit had to perform in small provincial music halls, improving his act and working his way to the top. His career took off when he got under the management of Masculine, his childhood hero from the Egyptian hall. Selbit had some really cool ideas. For instance, he came up with an illusion that he called the Mighty Cheese. A large wheel of cheese was on stage, and Selbit said that it was the strongest cheese on earth. Volunteers from the audience tried to wrestle it to the ground, but they could not do it because cheese would push them back. I think it is amazing. Another Selbit's illusion was walking through a brick wall, which later was performed by Harry Houdini, who made quite a lot of publicity with this act. This spirit painting act, in which a painting magically appeared on a blank canvas, brought Selbit international fame. He did a very successful US tour and also appeared on the cover of an influential magazine for magicians, The Sphinx. In his interview for The Sphinx, he said, "If a magician is sensible, he can be among friends anywhere. Conjurers have no country. The world is their field and mankind their nationality." This was in 1911. 10 years later, he would realize that when real money gets involved, not all magicians are friends. On Monday, 17th of January 1921, an announcement in a London newspaper said, "A woman will be sawn in two at each performance this week." On that night, on the stage of the Finsbury Park Empire Theatre in the centre of London, an illusion titled "Sawing Through a Woman" was performed for the general public for the first time in history. And it became an immediate sensation. This is how Selbit's version of the illusion looked like. The illusion was titled "Sawing Through a Woman." The assistant had ropes tied to her wrists and ankles, and a few volunteers from the audience held the ends of the ropes to ensure that she could not move inside the box. When the box was closed, Selbit snapped padlocks to secure the lid. It was a wooden box, and after it was closed, one could not see the assistant anymore. Then sheets of glass and steel blades were pushed through slots in the box, dividing it in 8 parts. Then the operation began. 2 assistants cut the box in halves with a cross-cut saw. Selbit then removed the blades, opened the box, cut the ropes free, and the audience saw that the lady was complete and safe. This hair-raising spectacle, as the newspapers called it, became an instant success. So what was so special and new about this illusion? The idea of torturing someone on stage during a magic show was not new at all. For example, decapitation is a really old illusion. The Indian basket, a trick in which an assistant is put into the basket and then the performer puts swords through it, is also a very old effect. 19th century magician Dr. Lin presented an act Palingenesia. In this illusion, an arm, a leg and a head of an assistant were cut off. In 1859, legendary French magician Jean-Eugène Robert-Houdin described an illusion performed by his teacher, magician Torini. In this trick, a man was put in a box, the box was sawn in half, 2 parts were separated, and each of them happened to contain a twin.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves to witness the death-defying feat first performed by the great Torini for Pope Pius VII.
Most likely Torini never existed and Robert-Houdin made this all up, but there is no doubt that most magicians read his memoirs. And so the concept of sawing a person was already there. So it was not the torture or the saw that were new, but the presentation and the context. See, the thing is that Selbit did not just perform a new trick, he did more than that. He hit 2 major cultural trends at the same time, probably without even realizing it. But this is how all genius artistic innovations usually happen. First, using women as assistants was not a standard thing before Selbit. Robert-Houdin often used his son, and masculine show often included men as assistants. Women took part in magic shows, but they were either reading minds or representing angels or magical fairy tale queens. Women as assistants who get into tight boxes was not something that people of the Victorian times expected to see. It did not align with Victorian etiquette, and also don't forget that Victorian style required women to wear quite big dresses, which of course was not practical for this kind of tricks. But in 1921, norms were changing. Introducing a woman as a passive subject of torture worked on two levels. First, it provided an opportunity for adding a sexual element to the trick, which would work great throughout the 20th century. And second, the gender roles at the time were beginning to be redefined. Rights of women was a controversial topic of the day, so having a woman on stage placed in a very strange situation was a bit scandalous, a bit strange, but definitely captivating. When Selbit introduced this sewing in 1921, he offered £20 a week to Christabel Pankhurst to work as his assistant. The irony of this publicity stunt was that Miss Pankhurst was the leader of the British women suffrage movement for women's rights.
You know, a real magician always needs an assistant. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure.
The second trend was naturalistic horror.
Give you the illusion of sawing a woman in half. You're crazy!
Selbit presented his illusion as a serious experiment. It was not a music performance or just another trick. It was an amazing scientific act. Amazing and horrifying. For example, Selbit's assistants carried buckets filled with red liquid that looked like blood to the front of the theater after a performance and poured this liquid into the gutter. And it may sound weird, but this is exactly what audiences at the time wanted. Late 19th, early 20th century in Europe was a time of decadence. Everybody felt bored, anxious, depressed and lost. So people were really into dark and morbid stuff. For example, Parisian morgue was a popular place to go on an excursion, maybe even on a date. And stories like that of the Jack the Ripper, whose horrible murders were extensively covered by the national newspapers, created only more buzz around such topics as death, pain, mutilated bodies. One of the important cultural phenomena of the time was the French Theatre du Grand Guignol, aka Theatre of Horrors. The shows of the Grand Guignol featured gory special effects and bloody scenes. Blood, acid, cut out eyes, hands and heads and legs, they had all this fun stuff there. It was like a slasher movie but on stage. People fainting in the front row was a usual thing. And also a story about a doctor or a scientist going mental and starting killing people and doing all sorts of crazy stuff was very popular in the place of Grand Guignol. And many magicians would later continue using this narrative in their performances. So, long story short, Selbit came up with the right idea at the right time. He was performing his new miracle across Britain with great success and already started negotiating a tour in the US when he received news from America that made him worried. It turned out that the same illusion was already being produced in the US by someone else. Well, this is what often happens. Every time a genius idea is created, there will be someone who will try to capitalize on it, no matter what. In case with the sewing, it was an American magician, Horace Goldin. Horace Goldin was a perfect example of the American dream. An immigrant from Lithuania who came to the US with his parents when he was just 16, who had a strong accent and a speech impediment, and who had to go through hardships and fight for his place under the sun, and who finally made an impressive career in show business. At the age of 29 in 1902, he appeared before the King George VII of England, and more cool bookings followed. However, his luck failed him. In 1918, during an international tour, a ship that carried all his equipment and also his money sank. He had to declare bankruptcy and start from scratch. So when he heard about a new sensational illusion from England, he knew that it was his chance to regain his fortune. Immediately after reading about Selbit's success with the illusion, Horace Goldin proclaimed to the New York press that he was the originator of sewing through a woman. Later in his memoirs, Goldin wrote that he had come up with this idea many years earlier in 1906, when he was walking in Berlin and noticed a doll in a little cradle in a shop window, and it suddenly occurred to him that if such a doll could be sewn in half and then restored, it would be a good effect. He also said that he offered this illusion to many theater managers, but no one was interested until 1921. There is no evidence of this happening except for Goldin's own words. Goldin never presented any proof of him coming up with this idea before Selbit, but he did not care about proof. He had a plan. In less than 6 months after Selbit's premiere in London, on June 3, 1921, Goldin presented his version of the sewing in New York. During his first performance, he used a boy as his assistant, and the illusion was called Sewing a Man in Two. And it was not a sensation at all. But Howard Thurston, a great American magician, happened to be in the audience and offered Goldin to improve his apparatus. Thurston was a true professional who knew what audience wanted and how vaudeville worked. So the improved version was created. Instead of a wooden coffin, it was now a smaller, colorful box. The head and the feet of an assistant were protruding through the end of the box, and this was not sewing through a woman anymore, but sewing a woman in half, because two parts of the box could now be separated. This act was not a scientific experiment anymore, but an entertaining spectacle that combined a sexual element, fun and thrill, all presented as a shiny vaudeville act, a perfect product for the Roaring '20s. And Goldin organized some very cool publicity for his illusion. Ambulances drove through town streets with banners on their sides. "We are going to Keith's in case the soul slips." Keith was the name of the theater company where the illusion was performed. Nurses in uniforms stood in the theater lobbies as guests entered the theater. Goldin also ran advertisements in the daily newspapers, which said, "Girls wanted to be sewn in half next week. Guarantee $10,000 in case of fatality."
Which end do we talk to? The end with the mouth.
To ensure that no one would steal and copy the illusion, Goldin did two things, both of which backfired. First, he patented his illusion under all possible names. Second, he franchised it and had several magicians perform the trick all across the country, making sure that he was in control of who, when and where performed the act. As the sewing was performed all over the US, it became more and more popular, and obviously more and more magicians wanted to copy it. And it turned out to be quite simple to do, because remember, Goldin patented his illusion, which also meant that the secret was made public and could be easily obtained. So already in November 1921, less than a year after the first public performance by Selbit, and just a couple of months after Goldin started performing this illusion in the US, one could buy a complete apparatus or find a detailed plan of the illusion in a book for about $5. And so for the rest of his life, Goldin would earn ridiculous amounts of money in show business and also spend most of his earnings on lawsuits. This in turn created even more publicity for the illusion and even more copycats. And what about Selbit? Well, when Selbit came to the US with an aspiration to claim his rights for the illusion and become a star, it was already too late. He arrived in the US shortly after Goldin submitted his patent and started presenting his version, claiming that it was the original. Selbit sued Goldin over the appropriation of his effects, but lost. The court decided that Goldin's sewing was a different illusion. Selbit's series presentation did not really work for the US audiences. It was not entertaining enough. Moreover, Keith Theatre Company arranged for either Goldin or one of his staff magicians to perform a week in advance of Selbit in every city on his route. Soon Selbit decided to return back to England. His career in magic was still a success because he managed to invent many more ingenious illusions and perform until his death in 1938. Goldin continued to perform this sewing illusion and never gave up his claim that he was the originator of the effect. It is funny how in his memoirs he never mentions Selbit's name and calls him either an English illusionist or the Englishman. But it must be said that Goldin was a talented illusionist and came up with many improvements and created multiple versions of the trick, such as the one with a transparent box and a boxless version, in which the assistant was on a table in full view and was cut in half by a buzz saw. Public exposures of the sewing started appearing very soon after its creation. In 1922, a short movie exposing the secrets of the illusion was produced and shown all over the US and England. Goldin managed to sue the film company, bring the case to the High Supreme Court of New York and stop the demonstration of this film in theaters. But more exposures followed. In 1933, when this sewing was already considered to be a standard trick in a magician's repertoire, Camel Cigarettes ran an ad campaign aimed at their competitor, Lucky Strike. The message was that Lucky Strike tricks people because no one knows what they put in their cigarettes, and Camel on the other side is honest and transparent. Hence the motto of the campaign: "It is fun to be fooled, it is more fun to know." Campaign was a series of ads and each of them explained a popular illusion, among them the sewing. In the following decades, this illusion would be exposed dozens if not hundreds of times and also appear anytime a magician would be mentioned, from Looney Tunes cartoons to Hitchcock movies, from films about magicians to popular series.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Hugo the Great!
But wait, we can see why this trick became so popular in 20s and 30s. But why did it remain popular? There are at least three factors that made this illusion a timeless classic. First of all, magic in general does not change too fast. Magicians still perform effects which are hundreds of years old. And the sewing, well, it had enormous publicity, and the legal fights between Selbit and Goldin were, as Goldin himself said, an amazingly good advertisement for magic. So it already started with a great boost to its popularity. And then every famous magician performed it. Thurston, Blackstone, Mark Wilson, Doug Henning, Jonathan Pendragon, Penn and Teller, everyone. And already in the early 30s it took place in pop culture. In 1944, Orson Welles did this trick with Marlene Dietrich in the movie Follow the Boys. And both Welles and Dietrich were superstars of the time. Second, it is a very practical piece of magic. It can suit different performance styles and it can be performed anywhere and anytime. Unlike the Vanishing Lady, another illusion that went viral in the late 19th century and that required a trapdoor, lots of practice, and the effect was finished in 2 seconds, the sewing is a perfect commercial effect. You can do it on stage, on TV, in the street, or at a birthday party.
For my shocking finale. Not for the squeamish, not for the faint of heart.
Moreover, if you write a good script, you can easily turn it into a 10-minute long act, and time is money. So the sewing is sort of similar to a floating table effect. Practical, visual, and commercial. And even if we know that nothing can go wrong, subconsciously we still might feel some danger.
There's a metal rod in place that stops the saw blade from going too far. Tell her! She's okay! She's okay!
Which makes this illusion more memorable. No surprise, this illusion was used in horror movies so many times.
Just stop! I can't pull my feet through!
Stop talking. You're distracting me.
One can also ask if this act has become a cliché, a meaningless optical illusion, a cheesy act that uses the same colorful boxes with bad acting and a predictable outcome. Well, as always with magic and with art in general, it depends on the artist. There are some bad examples and there are some good examples. Dani Lari created quite a dramatic presentation. Victorian Jr. carried on the traditions of Grand Guignol and spilled some blood on stage. There are classic presentations like that of Jonathan Pendragon. There are funny and playful acts like that of Harry Blackstone Jr.
Please don't be afraid. No. I've never done anything to hurt you, have I?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There is quite a crazy version of Penn and Teller, or my personal favorite, David Copperfield's version. In his Death Saw act, everything makes perfect sense. It is a story about a failed escape attempt, and then time is reversed and things come back to normal. I will leave links in the description so you can grab some popcorn and have a sewing illusion night. Perfect for a date. Learning more about the history of magic allows us to have a better understanding on why magicians did what they did and be more aware of our own artistic choices and in general have more respect for magic as a performing art. And if you're a magician, you can also tell these stories to your spectators. They always like it. So as you guess, this is how I sell you the value of my channel, because I need your likes just like this saw needs blood. Anyway, subscribe to my channel, and if you have your favorite version of the sewing illusion, leave a link in the comment under this video. And I will leave sources that I used for my research in the description below. My name is Alex Romanov, this was Art of Impossible, thank you for watching, I will see you next time.